I am a former evangelical Christian pastor, and I left my faith 7 years ago. Let's talk about it. So many of you, if you follow me for a while, know that I once was an evangelical Christian pastor. I was one for, 15 years almost. I first became a youth pastor when I was 19, which was not a good age to become a youth pastor. I'm just gonna say that. Things went back quickly and often. But with that said, I grew up kind of in the church. Both my parents were Baptist preacher kids, though I did kind of have a crazy, not great upbringing. I was always around church. Church was always a thing that happened. Went to a Christian school, and I always had faith. I always believed in what the church taught because it was just something for me to grasp onto in all the craziness. When things started getting really crazy with my family is when I really started to embrace my faith, right about middle school. I just needed positive adults around me, and the church provided that. And the church actually did a great job of that, having positive, good people who are good role models, kept me out of trouble, and I am very thankful for that. But I grew up in an evangelical Southern Baptist vein of Christianity, which was very, very literal, very, very conservative, very, very, this is the Bible says what the Bible says, and you don't deviate from it at all. Most people will call it literalists, or, it's basic conservative evangelicalism. And my grandpa on both sides of my family were pastors, and they're Baptist pastors. My grandpa on my dad's side was a Southern Baptist pastor, so that's a lot. And I went to a very, very conservative Christian school, which taught us things like purity culture and the Bible, is what it is. There's no deviating from it. We were taught in school, when they were referring to the LGBTQ community, they didn't call them gay or even homosexual. They used the F word to describe the LGBTQ community, like it was no big deal. I mean, that's how in depth in it I was. And going into my junior high school years, I was totally involved in youth group, and every time I could be in the church, I was in church. I was even working at our church. I was in Las Vegas at a Southern Baptist megachurch in Las Vegas. I was working as a janitor there. Every time I could be inside the church, I was inside the church. And I was actually at a Christian camp, I think it was between my freshman and sophomore year, when I decided to, I had accepted Jesus in my heart a few years prior to that. And then at Christian camp, I decided I wanted to be a full-time pastor, full-time in the ministry. And I surrendered to the call of being in ministry while I was in high school. And that's something, if you've ever heard of, Christian church camps, there's a lot of pressure on those. It's a very emotional, manipulative environment where they try to get kids to make decisions for Jesus and throw away, we burn CDs that are Christian, okay, quick story time, side note, we would do this thing where kids would bring their CDs and we would put them into a fire and we'd burn them. And the CDs were like non-Christian music, put in your NSYNC and your Britney Spears and your Korn and put them into the fire. And there'd always be that one kid when you put your CDs in the fire or your tapes in the fire. Yes, we had tapes still back then. There'd be one kid who'd be like, oh, I heard it hiss in the fire. It must be Satan bad. It's like, no, you're burning plastic. It's gonna hiss. I lost so much money every year on burning CDs or smashing CDs or that sort of thing. But anyways, after I surrendered to be in full-time Christian ministry in early high school, that's kind of was my career goal. That's what I was gonna do. I had blinders on, I am gonna follow Jesus, I'm gonna serve Jesus, I'm gonna be a pastor. And that's what I did right out of high school. I went on a mission trip, and then I found a church that needed a youth pastor, and I got hired there at 19, which, let me tell you, wasn't great. They were just looking for someone who knew their Bible, which I did, and who was charismatic, which I was, and who could work for cheap, which I was willing to do. And from there, I worked at a bunch of other churches. I got licensed as a pastor, what they called it. Went to Bible college, graduated from Bible college, worked a lot of time at Starbucks while working at those churches because I needed benefits, because a lot of these churches, they expect me to work full-time, but I could only pay me part-time and couldn't pay me benefits. So there was that too, which always kind of sucked. But I was in it. I was following Jesus. I was a pastor full-time. I had gone to Bible college. Luckily, it was an accredited Bible college, so my degree was real. A lot of people who go in the ministry and get a Bible degree, unfortunately, what happens is they go to an unaccredited Bible college, so their degree means absolutely nothing, and they have to start from square one. I went to Multnomah Bible College in Portland. It was accredited. It actually just got accredited, officially, even though it had been around for 70 years at that point. And I'm super thankful for that because I was able to go back to school after I left ministry and my faith and get a second bachelor's degree, and it only took me 2 years to get that instead of a full 4 years. That's where I got my degree in film at SOU. But anyway, so all that, I think it was probably around 2004, 2005, a lot of things that were happening in Christianity were not sitting well with me. And I began this slow process of what people call deconstructing, which just means you're questioning your faith and you're maybe walking away from it. And that's exactly what I was doing. I was walking away from my faith. I was questioning everything. I was kind of looking, why do we do this? Why do we that? Why are we treating the LGBTQ community a certain way? Why are we not so welcoming to, women and minorities? And why do women have these limited roles? And we see them and preach that they are secondary. And I had a lot of questions about the Bible too, because the Bible said a lot of things that I didn't necessarily agree with. I'm like, this is what the Bible says, chapter and verse. I knew it chapter and verse, but I'm like, I don't think that's practical or real, or maybe 4,000 years ago that could apply, but this is 2005. But I kept going, and I remember one experience I had that I will never ever forget. I was working at Starbucks and working at church at the same time, and I was closing the store with the shift supervisor, and he was gay. And it was a rainy day in Las Vegas, which doesn't happen very often. And me and him couldn't be any more different. I'm just gonna call him Jay. Me and Jay couldn't be any more different. He was a gay black man. I was a white Christian Southern Baptist pastor. It was pouring rain. I had a car. He took the bus to and from work, and he was standing out in the rain. It was pouring rain. He had it was probably close to midnight, because that's when Starbucks used to stay open, especially in Las Vegas, really late. And I said, hey, Jay, don't mean to stand in the rain. I can take you home. No big deal. I got you. He's like, are you sure? Yeah, I got you. So I'm driving him home, and as we're driving home, he tells me about things I just didn't expect. He started off with saying, hey, Andy, you and me are a lot alike. Now, like I just said, I'm a white Southern Baptist pastor working at a Starbucks. He was a gay black man working at Starbucks. I felt like the only thing we had in common was the fact that he was working at Starbucks. Jay then began to tell me the story about how he used to want to be a pastor, how he was an intern for his pastor, how he wanted to go into ministry. He just wanted to serve God. He wanted to serve Jesus. But he was dealing with what we called in the church at that time, same-sex attraction. And he felt a lot of guilt about it. He felt a lot of shame about it. But he wanted to be a pastor, and he wanted to serve God. So he went to his pastor and said, hey, I am struggling with this same-sex attraction. What do I do? And according to Jay, they cast him out. They said he was an abomination. He said they actually used that word, abomination. They said, come back when you've prayed the gay away. And I remember hearing that, and I remember seeing tears in his eyes and thinking, wow, that's not what I want to be involved with. And he went on his way, but that began a very, very slow deconstruction for me, that I began to see, wow, this is not what I want to be a part of. And it took another 12 years before I left. But in that 12 years, I began to slowly change, slowly look at things differently, began to question everything. Another story, I was working at a Baptist church as a music and worship pastor, music pastor at a church in Crescent City, California. And it was 2012, and I had just come into the office, and it was the day after the election. Obama had just been reelected the night before, and I had voted for Obama. And I actually voted for Obama in 2008 too. At that time, I was trying to be a Christian who was able to separate his politics from his religion. I was still very, very conservative when it came to my theology, but very, very liberal when it came to my politics for reasons of, I thought human decency, which I kind of still do. And the night before, I had posted on my Facebook, hey guys, don't worry about the election. Jesus is still king. And the whole point of that was everyone, who would go into my church, my circle of friends were freaking out that, oh no, Obama's gonna be another 4 years. We're all gonna be, whatever. You can imagine, fill in the blank. And I was just trying to calm everybody's nerves as a pastor on staff at that church, like, hey guys, And apparently I'd said some things in some sermons before about social justice that a lot of people didn't like, the deacons didn't like. And I had started some initiatives in our community, like, tutoring after school and after school sports programs in our gym, because we had this huge gym that wasn't being used but one day a week. And the deacons didn't like that. They said I was too liberal. So I got called in my pastor's office and was lectured for 2 hours, and he was trying to get me to basically tell him who I voted for, which, as you can imagine, was anxiety-inducing for me and frustrating. Yeah, I never did tell him, but it was about a year later that I was let go. But that just showed me, wow, we cannot separate our politics and our faith, and how dogmatic we are about those people and about everything. It just showed us how oh gosh, the whole thing just, I'm not even getting my words out right about this, which is really frustrating. I went to one more church after that, which I thought was a cool, hip church. The pastor wore skinny jeans, had tattoos. It was more of the same crap, just in skinny jeans and tattoos. And at that time, we adopted our 3 kids from foster care. 2 oldest had special needs, and we were struggling trying to get them the help they needed. And we were literally told by the elders of the church that we needed to not take our kids to therapy or try to get them therapeutic help, that we needed to pray it away. And that's the thing, pray it away. Why is that their answer for everything? Just pray it away. I don't get that. And that was really frustrating. At that particular youth group where I was youth pastor and I was the worship pastor, I was having a lot of LGBTQ youth coming to our youth group, and they were coming in just because it was a safe space to come to. And I would ask so many of them, hey, so you're coming on Wednesday nights, coming to youth group, coming to all the events we're doing. I did a lot of cool stuff, a lot of hangouts. It was a fun time. That group was cool. But I'd ask them, hey, why won't you come on Sunday mornings? And one kid told me something that I'll never forget. I don't feel safe here on Sunday mornings. This was a gay kid who loved coming to youth group, who loved being around positive people, who had come out to his family. His family hadn't exactly embraced him, but he felt safe with me and my youth workers and the environment and the other students around. But on Sunday morning, he didn't feel safe. And that's when I began to slowly withdraw and get away from the church. And then the elders and pastor didn't like what I was doing, and they thought maybe I was getting too much influence, and they gave me a severance package. And at that point, I went to Southern Oregon University's film program and left my career and faith behind. One thing people don't talk about when leaving your faith behind, especially if you were a pastor, is you lose your community. I grew up in this. The Christian faith was everything to me, and I lost it in an instant. And people wouldn't talk to me anymore. I was shunned. We were thought of as abominations, as all kinds of things. And it was really sad because I had to start from square one. I had to learn to be human again. And I've been working through that, obviously in therapy, and that caused a lot of anxiety. I was having anxiety attacks the last year of my time at that last church because of so much internal struggle and existential dread I was dealing with. And I say all this not to say that faith is bad and church is bad necessarily, but for me, that is my story. I was told that I was nothing on my own and I had to have God's help. If there were problems, I needed to pray it away. I was literally told that any good that was in me was filthy rags to God, and it's no good, and there's no good in any of us. It's a theological concept called total depravity. There is no good in you. And they would just bang that into our head. There's no good in you. You need Jesus. But in doing that, there was this submission they were banging into our heads, and guilt and shame they were banging into our heads, and it just didn't work for me. Now, don't get me wrong. There are Christian pastors and leaders out there who are great, and I've met them. There are in churches that are affirming to the LGBTQ community, who don't take a literalist approach to the Bible. I've been to those churches, and they actually were instrumental in my healing. Bugs, right in my eye. And though I've walked away from my evangelical Christian faith, I still consider myself a very spiritual person, which a lot of people have a hard time understanding, and that's okay. But I will never down on anyone for their deeply held spiritual beliefs. Those things for a lot of people are very, very, wow, that light just came on, are very, very deeply entrenched. They were raised with it. I get that. But I say this because for so many of you, I know for me, there was this fear of leaving. There was this fear of leaving it all behind. And I just want to affirm that because it is scary. Leaving your faith, your lifelong faith behind is extremely scary. Not only is there the existential dread, like you were taught since you were a kid, if you leave, you're going to go to hell, but also the loss of community. For some people, in some faiths, in some churches, the loss of your job, the loss of respect, the loss of your home, whatever the situation, the loss of your very family. And I was very fortunate in that my wife was dealing with similar things at the same time, and we both kind of left around the same time. I actually think, now I know, she was kind of disengaged sooner than I was because we had a conversation at Red Robin while I was still a pastor where she said, I don't believe in God anymore. And I was like, oh crap. Well, that's gonna be a problem because I was still a pastor, but I was still internally struggling with those same things. And yeah, that was very anxiety-inducing time in my life, but I'm better for it now. And I just say all that to say that you are beautiful. You have dignity, worth, and purpose. And the universe, nature, God, the divine, or nothing is okay. As long as you show other people love, dignity, and respect. And you don't bash your faith on other people, that's fine. But for those of you who are struggling with your faith and thinking, maybe I want to go, but I'm scared. It's not easy, but I'm going to tell you, it's possible. So anyways, thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. If you like this video, I make outdoor mental health, life content. I vlog. YouTube will think you like these videos. You can also subscribe down here. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. You can follow me on all the various social media networks at Andy Films and Hikes, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.